In previous lessons, we have learned some composition techniques and introduced several commonly used composition methods. But how do these compositions organically connect with our image? How to place elements in the correct position within the image? How to create an illustration that visually attracts the audience's attention? These all need to be considered before we start painting. Composition consists of three main elements: visual center, compositional principles, and visual balance. The visual center is the main subject in the image that the audience notices first. When we feel an illustration is mediocre, it's usually due to a lack of a focal point or excessive focal points. The visual center is very important for an illustration. Without it, the image lacks priority, and we wouldn't know the main point of the painting. For example, for this image, what do you think the focal point is, and where should our focus be? Actually, nowhere, because it simply has no focal point. So many people might close this image after just a few seconds, because there's nothing that attracts us. So we need to manually add a focal point to it. For example, add a character or a distinctive object. This way will make the image attract you. Another example is the arrangement like this. Identical objects neatly lined up in a row. They are all the same. None looks relatively prominent. So our brain will directly reject this kind of image because the image doesn't express any meaning. But if we make one of the objects stand out, the effect of the entire image becomes completely different. The altered object can stand out from the image. Our gaze is involuntarily drawn to it. There are many ways to add a focal point. Here are a few relatively simple and easy methods. 1. High contrast, hue and saturation. Second, depth of field effect, DOF. A method to make everything except the subject blurry. 3. Adding a sense of motion. If everything else is stationary, but something moves, the image will also attract people's attention. 4. Emphasizing the depiction of facial features and body proportions, because people's attention to people is innate. 5. Also, using leading lines or using geometric primitives. Let's look at a few cases. In this image, your focus will definitely be on this person. What elements guide us to notice him? The first is high contrast. The black silhouette effect makes us ignore the background buildings. The next point is body proportions. Our eyes are very sensitive to distinguishing body proportions. Another reason is these leading lines. All the light sources serve as leading lines, pointing towards this person. Thus, our eyes follow the leading lines and focus on him. Also, there is the character's action. This is a dynamic character, while other parts of the image are stationary. These points are key to ensuring our attention is guided to the center. Look at this one. There are many influencing elements in the image that make our attention focus on the building. The biggest influence in this image is the road. The road simply and effectively directs our vision to the end of the road. This ensures the audience's attention goes to the building. Moreover, the image also features symmetry. The left-right symmetry. Attention is also drawn to the center point, and it's where our building is located. Additionally, the neatly arranged vegetation is also a very effective leading line. The trees and the road as guides are actually repetitive, but when added together, they further concentrate people's attention on the single object at the end. The visual center is the first major element of composition. The second major element of composition is the compositional principles. Compositional principles are the arrangement of elements in the image based on certain rules. For example, the renowned rule of thirds is an example of organizing the image form according to a pattern. But no matter what composition principle is used, we need to master it thoroughly, just like the several composition techniques and methods we talked about before. But many students cannot use them flexibly. They can only scratch the surface. But after learning compositional principles today, it will be very different. Everything will be clear to you, like disappearing mists. Let's look at a case first. Look at these randomly placed chairs. There's no pattern, and it doesn't look good either. We might find this image unappealing because we don't know its point of interest. We don't know where its focus is. We only see messy chairs randomly placed inside. Now, look at this arranged one. Although it doesn't use any compositional principles or techniques, it's much better compared to the previous one. At least it looks more comfortable. This is because a pattern was designed for the chairs. The chairs are in groups. That's why we need to find some kind of pattern or rule in the image. Anything with a pattern looks better than chaos. Compositional principles generally include the rule of thirds, the golden ratio, triangular composition, symmetrical composition, and so on. Next, let's discuss them in detail. First is the rule of thirds. This is a familiar one. It involves dividing the image into 3 parts, vertically and horizontally. These lines intersect at 4 points. The main subject of the image can be placed on one of these intersection points. Of course, if the top right point holds the main subject, the bottom left point should also have something placed symmetrically to create a certain balance. This is the rule of thirds. It's also a simplified version of the golden ratio. Let's look at a few illustrations that use the rule of thirds. The main subject of the image is placed on one of the intersection points. The benefit of using the rule of thirds is that, besides the main subject, there are other elements expressing the story. It's important to note that if an illustration has many characters, not every character needs to be on an intersection point. The image must primarily have a clear hierarchy. The rule of thirds is also widely used in film and television works because it's perfect for setting character positions. You can not only see the relationship between the character and the environment, but also how well the positional relationships between characters are handled. For example, when 2 people are facing each other, it can both effectively show the focus of the image and express the story well. Next, let's talk about the golden ratio. Everyone has probably heard of the golden ratio, but few may know how to apply it. Many things in nature exist according to this ratio, such as seashells, some plants, flowers, and other natural objects. When we recognize this ratio, some will start to think, why is this ratio so widely used in the natural world? Since it exists, some designers apply this design theory to their creations. The iPod and the violin were made based on this ratio. Some also believe that, because we see too many things with this ratio, we become too familiar with it and subconsciously find it pleasing. The more we see something, the more familiar we become with it, and it becomes attractive to us. But anyway, the golden ratio has been proven by designers to be truly useful. Let's appreciate a few images. As you can see, the main subject fits perfectly with the golden spiral of the golden ratio. This is not accidental, it's the result of conscious design, so the effect is also very good. All objects are characterized by this spiral, finally guiding our vision to the subject. Look at this one. After overlaying the golden ratio lines, we find the focal point is exactly the image's main subject. Other objects converge towards the focal point along the spiral. However, we must know that the golden ratio can make your work look good. But applying the golden ratio doesn't guarantee the work will be good. After all, painting is a process that requires comprehensive consideration. There is also the triangular composition method. This principle is used relatively less. It's generally used for characters. It can create outstanding character illustrations. Also, in many comic works, we see the body appears larger when closer to the camera, and smaller when further away from the camera. It looks very dynamic. So this is more effective for a single character. It's less used in scenes. The last one is symmetrical composition. Symmetrical composition uses the horizontal or vertical center axis as the midline to create a mirror image of something. This is very common in architecture. For example, the Palace Museum and its various buildings and palaces. Applying symmetry makes buildings look solid, powerful, solemn, and serious. Therefore, symmetrical composition is still applied in modern cathedral architecture and government architecture. These are symmetrical compositions using the vertical central axis as the midline. There are also symmetrical compositions using the horizontal central axis as the midline. For example, mountains and water. Water surface serves as the horizontal central axis, reflecting the image above. This can also produce stunning effects. The above are the compositional principles. You can use these principles to arrange the elements in your image well. You don't necessarily have to use a specific one. It depends on how you conceive your image. When you are drawing a sketch, you can use a compositional principle to check if your composition is good and aesthetically pleasing. Finally, let's talk about visual balance. Visual balance is about dispersing some visual attention, eliminating visual fatigue, and making the image balanced, like a scale. It means you can't pile everything onto the focal point. Look at this case. This is very unbalanced. There is an object on the right, but nothing on the left. If this image were a scale, it would be imbalanced. Therefore, such a situation cannot appear in our own images. If it really occurs, you can place something on the left to maintain left-right balance. The thing on the left doesn't need to be equally large. It can be very small, but there must be something. Visual balance is about keeping your image balanced. Besides size, high contrast, saturation, facial features, and body proportions can all add visual mass and weight. So we need to balance these things. For example, this scene seems visually unbalanced. Why? Because our attention is guided to this main subject, and the subject has brightness, architecture, and characters, while the other side appears bare. So to maintain visual balance, simply adding an object to the bare place is not enough, because there are too many things adding visual weight on the other side. As we just said, there are not only people, but also architecture, and even light. So on the right, we can add some objects with lighting quality. Look at this image. There is a monster on the left. It occupies a large visual weight, but at the same time, there is also a character on the other side. Although one is large and one is small, they form a good visual balance. This conforms very well to the principle of visual balance. Actually, there are many more cases. You can find some scene illustrations to observe. Excellent illustrations almost all conform to visual balance. That's all for today's lesson. Let's briefly review. First is the visual center. This is a must in the image. If it is missing, the work will completely fail. Second is compositional principles. Arrange your scene and its elements according to some rules. Use different methods like the rule of thirds, triangular composition, and so on to ensure the final image achieves a good effect. And also, visual balance. Use the methods just discussed to balance the image. I hope this lesson can solve some of your problems with composition.